Hi, everyone. Great to have you back. As I had mentioned, we are going to shift gears. We've been talking a lot about passenger micromobility, shared micromobility, and now we're going to shift into the goods delivery and the last mile ecosystem. I am joined by three big-time innovators in this space. They operate in North America, Australia, Europe, and beyond. And we're going to talk a little bit about the state of the practice, a little about the policy shifts that are happening in this space, and what can be seen in the future as it relates to city partnerships. I'm joined by Mina, who's the CEO of Zoomo. He's also the co-founder. Mike Peregudov, who's the co-founder of Whizz, and then Payton Rockwood, who's the environmental sustainability strategy and operations lead for DoorDash. So if you can give a good round of applause for the panel, that'd be great. All right, so just to get us started, just so that everyone knows what's going on in this space, everyone has a little bit of a level set. What is the state of the practice as it relates to last mile economy? And what are some of the most exciting policy and regulatory shifts that you're seeing that would be helpful to advance last mile delivery?
Give me a
Mina,
shot.
yeah.
We're seeing a lot of regulatory change in this space. Zoomo operates in 7 different countries. So obviously regulations are very specific to individual countries, and it's going every which way in the different places that we operate. So we're in Australia, Germany, France, Spain, the UK, the US, Canada. And sometimes it's going in opposite directions. So what's very interesting to see right now in Europe is the direction or the state of play as regards to gig economy. Our work is very interactive with people who are freelancers. And what we're seeing, for instance, in Spain, is that the law is getting much stricter against being able to engage your workers as freelancers and having them being treated more as employees. Whereas actually we're finding in other parts of Europe, the laws are liberalizing, and actually there's more freedom for engaging gig workers that way. So I think it's really hard to pick the direction of travel on this. I think that overall Europe is probably moving towards more rights for gig workers that make them somewhat more employee-like. And that changes the way that fleet providers like ourselves engage with the platforms like DoorDash and the workers themselves. So I think that's one really interesting area of regulatory change. And then I think the other one is really a lot of stuff around batteries. I think that Europe has a very clear path forward in terms of the way that they're engaging with batteries and a clear regulatory path. I think Europe is very good at that. The US is less clear and very different by states. So I'd say they're kind of 2 interesting areas that we look at from a regulatory perspective.
Yeah. Mike, I'm curious your perspective coming from New York City. There's a lot of activity as it relates to e-bike regulation. Tell me more about that, or tell the audience more about the story that you're seeing unfold and how you're responding as a business owner.
Yeah, sure. At Whizz, we operate only in the US today. We started the company 3 years ago in New York, now operating in 4 states and expanding to a couple of more by the end of the year. I want to say that it's completely different if we consider New York and all the other states in America, because while all the other states in America are trying to implement more, say, micromobility devices, e-bikes, and so on, because mostly people use cars, including delivery. In New York, it's completely different. New York already completely switched to e-bikes, for example, in delivery space where we operate, and now is trying just to understand what's happening actually. So, and what's also interesting about North America is that it's the last large market on Earth where the vast majority of last mile delivery is made by gasoline cars still. So if you consider Europe, China, India, Latin America, Africa, any market, most of last mile delivery is made by 2 wheels, either e-bikes, motorcycles, mopeds, or something in the middle. In the US, I guess according to DoorDash, it's 95% food delivery made still by car. Is that something like that?
Roughly, yeah.
Say 90%.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, most of American cities are trying to implement and incentivize more and more micromobility devices. While in New York, there are more than, for example, in the delivery space, there are more than 100,000 e-bikes. And it's honestly a complete chaos. A lot of problems with accidents on the road, speed limits, and most of all, battery fires. So most of the regulation in New York is about restriction, while in all the other states, it's more about incentives.
I would add a little bit on like the general state of the last mile economy as well. DoorDash has, I guess, first of all, we operate in 4 countries with the DoorDash brand, US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then we operate in Europe through our subsidiary Volt in about 31 other countries. So in the US, we see strong food delivery demand, and we've grown orders 20% year over year for the past couple of years, continued growth from the pandemic. And that's due to order frequency, growth, and a number of other things. And on top of that, I think more relevant for this audience is we've tripled the share of deliveries on 2 wheels in the last 3 years. So the absolute growth from order volume and the share growth from 2 wheel, it's a very exciting time, and we're continuing to move those numbers. So I think it's 95 might be a bit outdated, but we're looking to boost that in the US and change the culture there.
What are you doing specifically to signal that shift within the company and to signal the desire to your driver partners?
Well, first of all, we are looking to prioritize them for short deliveries in dense cities, which wasn't always the case, and making sure they get the right assignments, the right orders, and they have high quality. We see dashers in the top 20 cities in the US that are on e-bikes and mopeds actually earn 10% more. So part of it's education, part of it's incentives, and then part of it's partnerships as well. Partnering with both Mike and Whizz in Chicago and Zoomo in Australia and Toronto, and making access to e-bikes more affordable for couriers or dashers.
There's just a lot of movement, a lot of initiatives at the city level. This is more of a global take. So you see cities with zero-emission zones coming online. You see cities incentivizing e-bikes. They're passing legislation for that is in favor of more e-bike delivery. You're also seeing cities invest in urban logistics hubs. This, on paper, is exciting, but for you as the operators, how do you take this? How do you navigate the waves of all the initiatives that you're seeing, and how do you capitalize on it?
I mean, I think for me, it's just a overall macro tailwind. I think we're fortunate in being kind of a relatively private set of companies. We don't need government approval to operate. And so it's one of the reasons I got into this space was like not having to deal with the municipalities and the process that's all involved there. And so I think, relatively we're smaller companies that don't have massive policy teams. And so we're not going to spend as much time to try to influence the direction of policy. But I think in every country that we operate, it's a tailwind, whether it's ULEZ zone in London and equivalent things around the world, congestion charging coming in and out of New York City. We'll see which way that goes, or more investment in infrastructure in cities that helps to make it easier to traverse them on bikes and scooters, etc. So I think from our perspective, we see the world is electrifying. A greater proportion of those fleets are going to be smaller electric vehicles, and the policy environment in general is highly supportive of that. And so we just need to do what we're doing well, and we'll do well.
Yeah. What's the impact of the congestion pricing zone?
No, for us, we don't have it because it works for cars, not for bikes.
Are you seeing an uptick?
Yeah, but we have some other interesting special effects. So, for example, New York and New Jersey is effectively one city, but 2 different states. And in New York, the speed limit for e-bikes is 25 miles, while in Jersey, it's 20. So, for example, one day we got, 50 of our bikes arrested by police in Jersey because our delivery guys got them in our location in New York, then got to Jersey. We didn't know that. So we had to adjust and to learn how to dynamically change speed limit, for example, in different states. So that was one funny story. Well, not that funny, but just a story.
Sounds terrible, actually.
Yeah, but speaking of regulation, I think that, well, especially in New York, I think there are a lot of regulations happening. I would say 50% of them are great, and other 50% are not. And I think our role is just to help cities navigate and to help them to resolve some issues from the technological standpoint, because sometimes you can resolve some problems with tech without any additional bureaucracy or budget.
Right.
Sometimes cities maybe don't understand it fully, and I think our role is just to help them to bring some tech solutions on the table.
Yeah.
Like, for example, in New York, they consider registering all bikes, doing plates on all bikes, insuring all bikes, like treating bikes like cars. I'd say it's not the best way to do that. I'd say if you want more control, we can provide it through different, APIs, IoT devices, different type of connection and stuff, and it will cost zero. It can be way more efficient and so on. So I think that, like I said, half of regulation is great, another half is bad. So we just need to choose the right one.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm kind of struck by what you said, Mina, about for years you've been operating in the background, no city intervention, no government intervention for the most part. Now you're seeing a lot more focus because cities want to see the outcomes that come from the great work that you're doing, the technology that you provide, better delivery efficiency, reduce emissions, so on and so forth. How do you strike a balance bringing in cities that typically have not been part of your operation, and now they care so much about it? What's the right balance?
I mean, I think for us, it's just showing that we're doing a great thing for the couriers.
Yeah.
I think really for anybody, the human element is really important. For us, like our fundamental value is serve the rider. I think what's really interesting about this entire delivery space is that 90% of the people that are doing this are like fresh migrants. And one way to think about our business in terms of subscriptions for couriers is like we're a financial product. We're often the first source of credit that these people are ever getting, when they land in America, when they land in Europe. And so I think what's really interesting when we're talking with legislators or with anybody that we're interacting with is that we're not just solving an environmental issue or a congestion issue. We're solving a real human issue and doing it in a way because it's hard to kind of give somebody who has zero credit history, doesn't have access to a credit card, might not even have a debit card. They kind of they have a virtual one or something when they first come, or a prepaid card. We're taking risk on them with an asset that can be worth thousands of dollars or euros, whatever it might be, and giving them that leg up to kind of be contributing to society, to pay taxes, to kind of have their first job in a way that didn't exist, before us. And so I think that resonates. I mean, with the team members who join us, with investors and with government officials, they realize that we're not just providing a vehicle solution. We're really providing much more than that. And that's how kind of, I think, people like, Mike and myself have kind of gotten around and figured out this tough problem of how do you finance people who other people don't want to touch for finance, is by treating them as human beings and really kind of caring about their individual needs.
Yeah. Payton, you have a pretty bold mandate to make a pretty significant mode shift. What's the role of a city or government in that, or is there a role? Do you want to go it alone and kind of take it the DoorDash way?
I think cities can really help expand the TAM for the amount of deliveries that can be done on two wheels. I think last mile delivery and e-bikes have a natural fit, and I think we can do a great job getting the first 100 or 200 people out there on bikes in cities, specifically in the US, where no one's on bikes. And cities can help us by building infrastructure to expand that and further reduce traffic, further increase the TAM for the amount of deliveries that can be done on two wheels, and ultimately change the culture of a city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the regulatory environment, certainly there's more of a move to regulate these spaces and some of the companies that operate in the space. What would you see as being a good outcome as it relates to regulation, or is there a good outcome for your companies? Are there regulatory moats that you can create that help you, but also advance the needs and the desires of cities?
I mean, I think regulation is actually great because, for example, what happens in New York is a complete mess right now, being honest. So it should be somehow fixed. Like I said, it should be just fixed in a smart way. And I want just to add on top of what Mina said, that cities always often think about it like, I don't know, green delivery, sustainability, all these words. But we work with gig workers, and honestly, they care about different things. They want it to be affordable, durable battery, so they could make as much orders as they can, and that it would not be stolen from them. So these three things, they don't care about sustainability, right? They care about like how I can work on the thing. So we should regulate this market for sure, just to bring more order to that. But we should do it in a smart way, so the price for the device would not grow. Otherwise, gig workers will struggle and probably will switch to some other uncertified or whatever cheaper devices.
Yeah.
So
It's really interesting that the regulators here can cause issues. So in Australia, they decided to provide kind of tax incentives for getting a car or an electric motorbike, but there was nothing about bikes. And I think it's probably the same in every kind of market, and every micromobility kind of policy conversation is going to be that the lobbying from the automotive industry is going to be much stronger than from this industry. So even though in the last mile or using a vehicle for work, it's a huge industry of using e-bikes for work. That hasn't been getting any incentive at all. I was kind of chatting with somebody yesterday. There's these things called the white certificates in France, which you can kind of show how many emissions you're saving and sell them to people that are making emissions. But the way that they're crafted, it's like either a quad bike or an e-bike that's sold. And there's not really any clear reason why it ignored, a rented bike or a what about three-wheeled bike? Actually, in Paris, they prefer three-wheel bikes much more than quad bikes. So I think the regulations where they become very kind of prescriptive and specific can cause distortions. And so I think that to some extent, lighter touch, more market mechanisms. I mean, it's supposed to be market mechanism carbon trading, but there's still all these specific rules that create very strange distortions where customers in France don't care about riding on quad bikes for some reason. The preferred model is the trike, and it just hasn't. But the regulations don't fit that at all.
Yeah. Is there a market that you see that is kind of an exemplary best practice from a regulatory standpoint, or even like a permissiveness in terms of the vehicle design that you think other cities or state governments need to take notice?
yeah, that's a question to Mina.
I mean, I think UK works pretty well for us. We have a variety of different cargo bikes, whether they're quad bikes or trikes or whatever it is. We have our e-bikes on the road there. We find ULEZ is very good at transitioning people naturally from petrol vehicles to electric vehicles, whether they're e-bikes or e-mopeds. The rules are kind of strict in terms of preventing illegal bikes. I think what's really interesting is actually where we find regulation falls short is, let's say Australia has a free trade agreement with China. Zoomo's biggest competition is like really low quality illegal bikes that are coming in from China with batteries that are much more likely to blow up. And actually, there's very little enforcement. There's very little either at the point of import or even police knowing what's, if somebody is not pedaling their bike, that's probably illegal, but they don't really enforce on that. And that's creating kind of risks. So I think Australia is probably a bad example and one of the least progressive. Whereas I do find that in Europe, they are strict. I mean, they had tariffs before they were cool. They're called the anti-dumping kind of rules that prevent these bad quality bikes coming into Europe. So there's different countries that are doing good things. I'm interested to learn more about. I just found out these white certificates in France and see if maybe they're happening elsewhere in Europe. That could be interesting as well. They don't exist in the UK.
Yeah.
I'd say not New York.
Yeah.
When the e-bikes are making SNL skits, it's probably not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that they did do a good job of is promote the use of swappable battery towers, and to reduce the risk of fire. That was reactive, of course, right? There was a problem, and they created an initiative off of that. What are some of the unforeseen policy issues or safety issues that you think that cities need to get ahead of that they're just not focusing on right now?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think they're focusing enough, being honest. But
Whoa.
Just being fair to New York. By the way, we are criticizing, but also I just wanted to give a couple of good examples actually. So battery swapping is one of them. It's a good one. The other one was trade-in program where New York decided to exchange old and bikes with dangerous batteries for new bikes for free, like half of a thousand bikes.
Right.
And the same now happening in Washington D.C. So I think that's a great program when they're trying, to fix things. But I think that, like Mina said, enforcement is very important. And by the way, in New York, what happened in New York recently, there was one company that cheated on the whole certification thing, and it was caught, and they had to settle a $1 million fee penalty for that. And I think that was also a very good signal for the market that, okay, guys, you should now be fair and do legal things. I think that enforcement is what we need.
I would add Washington, D.C. actually as a very strong example. They've invested in infrastructure. There's a ton of bike lanes. They've invested in studies, collaborative public-private partnerships with Whizz, battery swapping cabinets, and DoorDash to prove efficacy of the technology, swap dashers from mopeds to e-bikes. And I actually know a stat from Washington, D.C., 2023 to 2024, the two-wheel increased significantly and the customer order time or wait time dropped by 25%, which means more orders, which means more offers for dashers to work, which means more business and local commerce for everyone. So if you can get micromobility working, it has a flywheel effect on the whole local commerce economy.
And would you say that DC or Washington, DC is seeing the kind of transition fleet transition that you want to see at DoorDash as a result of those investments in the policy framework?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And who's comparable to DC from a mode share standpoint?
I would say San Francisco, also a very good example. They're always technologically adept and open to new technologies. They've embraced autonomous and two-wheel. They invest in infrastructure. They have a similar share as New York % of two-wheel deliveries, but seemingly none of the problems that New York has, which is interesting. I would say San Francisco and DC are two US examples that stand out.
Yeah. Were you going to say something?
I'm curious for DoorDash. I guess the story of DoorDash that I have in my mind is they started in the suburbs and kind of that was how they built their base competing against Uber Eats or whatever it was, back in the day. How much is the chicken and egg between as DoorDash made its way to the inner city areas that they needed bikes to kind of win market share there, or they went to those areas and then kind of as they grew market share, they increased bikes as well? How do you guys see it in terms of competing more effectively in those urban areas? Is it critical to kind of just do that?
Yes, totally. And I would say also that's part of the reason why we're behind in the shares. We started in the suburbs and moving into the cities. That's been the strategy since founding in 2020 or 2013. And you see a lot of couriers multi-apping and switching between apps. So if they have a vehicle, they were perhaps Uber Eats or Grubhub delivery driver in a city, they're probably going to be on a bike. You see them switching where the offers are. So we've just focused on customer retention and building orders. That's helped us gain share and move from the suburbs into the cities.
Mm-hmm. And do you see a role for mopeds in that sort of interspace between the urban and the...
Totally. We think mopeds can help expand the amount of deliveries done on two wheels. We think they could do more distant deliveries, higher capacity deliveries, things that e-bikes are not great for. We definitely see a role, whether they're electric or gas. I think in the US, everything's better than the old Toyota Corollas that Dashers are driving.
Yeah. By the
no
way,
offense to Corollas.
By the way, speaking of regulation and mopeds, we were trying to launch e-mopeds in the US for 2 years probably. Built our own moped, couldn't register it, and just decided not to do it. So that's a short story, because mopeds are very regulated. You should kind of register it in a special, system. then you have to insure them. Insurance is extremely expensive, and there are a lot of like many steps to make it happen. So it just didn't make economic sense for us. If you want to do it all legal, so most of the mopeds that are riding, say in New York or other cities, they are partly legal. So most of them are not registered in Department of Transportation or DMV, and most of the drivers don't have driving license. And if you want to try it legally, it's just near to impossible.
Interesting.
Unfortunately.
Agree. And that's exactly why you have to be cautious with regulation. Most of the growth we've seen in two-wheel has come from e-bike because it's a lot easier to access and there's less regulation around licensing and things that are restrictive, especially to people just getting their feet in the country. And yes, exactly why I think moped will be the second stage of growth. Right now we've seen it in e-bike, but the regulation or the difference in the regulatory environment for those two modes is very different. And it's very hard to navigate state by state regulations that are very different and treat different CC mopeds differently.
Interesting anecdote from Toronto. We saw like the growth in our e-bike business level off. And our city managers there said, well, there's this kind of new vehicle, on the streets that's super popular. It looks like a moped, but it does have pedals at the back.
Yeah.
And it's street legal, but it goes way faster, and you don't actually need to pedal these things. But there's everything about it actually meets the regulations strictly. And so that left us in a bind because it's clearly some sort of loophole. But couriers want to get onto that, and so our way of dealing with that was like we started to rent ourselves those vehicles from the supplier to be able to on-rent them to our customers. Because it feels like a regulatory risk that at some point someone's going to say, this doesn't look quite right, that there's a vehicle that looks like a moped but has the benefits of a bike, just because there's some pedals somewhere that you can't even reach with your feet. So there's a whole bunch of interesting stuff that comes up in every single city on this front.
Yeah, I was going to say where I live in the Netherlands. It seems like, this is totally an anecdote, but it seems like 75% of the deliveries that are made by the food delivery companies are by these fat tire bikes that are super fast, and they're technically an e-bike, but they're not the e-bike that I have. They're not a moped. With the lack of foresight to enable new form factors or different form factors that are more like a moped, are you going to just see more of a flooding of the market with these fat tire bikes? Just because of the speed and...
I mean, I think it comes down to enforcement, right? So I think that the challenge that we have as kind of serious operators is that we kind of, play by the rules. And so, if the regulators don't actually pay attention, if they don't enforce against the illegal stuff, then like we're in a really tough spot. All of us, like DoorDash wants to work with us because they know that, we're doing the safe thing, we're doing the legal thing. But, if ultimately the regulators don't come in and enforce against the fat tire, it's not that they're fat, but it's just that they go 60 kilometers per hour. And, they don't have they have a throttle that takes you all the way, and they're basically a motorbike. I understand if I was a food delivery guy, that would be the bike that I'm riding, unless somebody was enforcing. And when you see all of your friends doing it and it's happening for years, then that's a risk that you'll take, because you're trying to make a dollar, and the faster you do deliveries, the more money that you make. So it's a very natural direction of travel as a courier. So I think that really ultimately it's going to come down to the enforcement, and it makes our lives as legitimate operators really challenging when that doesn't happen.
I actually will give you another anecdote on the importance of enforcement. So what happened in New York and with our business in this February, we've seen an extreme growth, and we didn't understand what happens. But then we kind of started asking people like, what's going on? Why are you choosing Whizz over, I don't know, other solutions? And it appeared that most of these guys were using mopeds illegally, but then Trump won the elections, and Trump was hard on immigrants, and they became like afraid that if they're caught, they will be deported, and they decided, okay, I'm not risking it, I will go and rent a bike. So it was not even an enforcement, it was like the probable enforcement, I'd say, but it already worked really well.
Wow.
And now we see the decline of mopeds in New York.
Yeah.
That's what we see. So that's an example.
Well, I think we could talk for another 30 minutes, but we're unfortunately at time. Please give them a round of applause. This has been great.
Thank you.